Hello all, and welcome to another episode of Hot Cocoa. In this episode, as you can see if you're paying attention to the screen and not my face, we're going to be working on an iPhone application. In this case, we're going to be making the application that I made while I was bored a few years ago in C programming class. At least most of it was programmed then. And it's a calculator for doing photography stuff, which I can't really think of me using this out in the field, but somebody might. So this is part one of a 3-part series. The first one, we're going to talk about how you can make a menu using the navigation thing up here and a table view. The second episode is going to be working on the interface, designing the interface, modal views like this one that just popped up, and also having settings that you can save and stay there between closing and opening the application. And finally, the last episode is going to be how to take this application and run it on a jailbroken iPhone, or in my case, an iPod Touch, because I don't have $100 to pay Apple for the privilege of debugging my application on their precious little device. Alright, so that's what we're going to be working on. Let's begin. So to begin, we're going to create a new Xcode project, and for this one we want a navigation-based application that will give it to us preloaded with a nice navigation bar, as well as the UI table view that we're going to be making our menu out of. So let's call this menu app. Let's just leave it at that. No need to be silly here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is we have our root view controller here, which is the controller for the main view, which if I open that up in Interface Builder, like so, and we wait the 5 minutes that it takes for Interface Builder to start, it was actually rather quick that time. You can see it has our table view there, and if we look in the main window, uncuriously called main window, it has the view here, and it loads it from the root view controller, which is why, if you're wondering why the root view controller looks smaller than an iPhone screen, that's why. It just stretches out to fill this whole view space here. So let's close out of that. So the first thing we're going to do actually is make the second view that we're going to be switching to when someone clicks something on the menu. Now you'll notice in my original application I had 3. We're not going to go that far because it would be doing the same thing 3 times, and that's not very interesting. So we're just going to be making 1, and you can do that by going to File, New File, and I don't know if you could do this before because I don't remember being able to do this. Because that original app was actually written for iOS 2, and miraculously it still runs on iOS 4, which is unusual because I remember when I first wrote it, it didn't run on iOS 3, but whatever. So anyway, you can go under Cocoa Touch classes, pick the UI View Controller subclass, and check with Zib for user interface, or you can uncheck that and create the user interface separately. Just click on View and go through that, and then separately you would have to make a subclass for it. To save time, we're going to do it at the same time. Of course, the one thing I don't like about doing it this way is it makes the name of the view controller the same as the name of the Zib, which is mildly confusing for reasons I'll show you in a second. So let's call this screen 2. Finish. And So as you can see, it put them all in the resources folder, which I don't like. I want my code to be in the classes folder, or my classes to be in the classes folder, and my UI stuff to be in the resources folder. And it also made these the same name as that, which is confusing because you could name these view controller, which is what I would do. I would call them screen2 view controller, just like the root view controller, but then this would be named screen2 view controller.zip, and that wouldn't make sense, would it? So for the sake of not having to fix things in here, we're just going to call it screen2. But if you make it separately, you can name them things that actually make sense. But I'm concerned with time saving here. So now that we've created that, we can go in and make it look different so we know that we're switching to it. So we can get rid of the status bar because that's going to be coming from the main window. And let's mess with the background. How about that? We can do the table view background, or we can do the scroll view background, or any number of different shades of gray. I'm going to go with that one because it's a picture. So let's save that. And for once, we don't have to link anything in Interface Builder because we're going to be doing most of the view switching and code swapping and that sort of things within the code itself. So without further ado, let's get to the coding. For the root view controller.h, we need to set up two things here. The first thing being a mutable array, which our menu items are going to be put in. So let's set up an ns mutable array, and we'll call that menu list. And then secondly, we need to give the table view a name so that we can do stuff to it. So for that, we're going to use IB-outlet UI table view, and we will call that menu view. And then finally, because we are working in Objective-C 2.0, there's something that I don't think I've mentioned at all on the podcast before, which is the dot, what do you call it? The dot syntax, I guess, which you will see more of later, but which involves us setting this app property here, which is going to be non-atomic, and we want it to retain it, and that's going to be where our UI table view menu view is. And basically what that lets us do is address menu view with the dot syntax of Objective-C 2.0. Now, something to consider, when you're writing code for the iPhone, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're using Objective-C 2.0 stuff, because when it came out, it had Objective-C 2.0. So anything all the way back to the very first one is going to be able to understand that. However, when you're doing the same thing on OS X, I think it was Leopard was the first one that had Objective-C 2.0 in it. So if you want your app to run on Tiger and before, then you can't do this because it won't work. It won't know how to interpret it. All right. So now that we're done that, let's save that and switch over to the main meat of our programming here, which is our root view controller. Now the first thing we need to do as part of this property thing here is switch over to here and what's called synthesize it, which basically just it creates getters and setters for us. And you can look into dot syntax more if you want to, but basically it's a bit of a hybrid format because it doesn't do all of the things that the dot syntax does in some other programming languages like C# or Java, but it does do some of those things, which I will explain more once we actually get to an example of it, which will probably make far more sense than me trying to tell you now with no example. So now that we've done that, the first thing we're going to do is create our awake from nib method. So void awake from nib, and like that. And first, let's set up our menu list here. And we'll do that by NSMutable not set array alloc init, like so. And then the next thing we're going to do is set up our menu item, which is going to be a subclass or an instance of the screen to view controller class, which is declared here. Well, in there. Here, there. See? There. So whatever, if you name this something different, that's what you will use in this part that I'm about to type. For this, it's called screen to confusingly, like I said before, because I used the shortcut. But really, think of it as the screen to view controller, and we're making an instance of that. So this is going to be screen 2, and we're going to make an instance of that called screen to view controller. And we will initialize that by calling screen2's alloc and init. And now we're going to add that to our list of menu items. And for now, it's going to be the only menu item, because we're not going to add anything else. So we're going to use the add object method from NSMutable array with our menu list, and the objects that we're going to add are going to be NS dictionaries. So our menu is going to be an array of NS dictionaries containing a couple different things, well, 2 different things, one of which is the title of our windows that we're going to be switching to, and that's going to be the text that's going to be in the menu. And the other one is the view controller that's in charge of that window, so to speak. So we're going to use NS dictionaries dictionary with objects and keys. Objects and keys here. And oddly, to me anyway, the object comes before the name, or it comes before the key, but it's easiest, I think, to think of the key as the name referencing that object. So when you have an array of dictionaries, whenever you ask for the title, it's always going to return what you named in that dictionary as title. I think it's confusing that comes after the thing that you were naming, but that's the way it is. So the title is going to be Angular FOV. Actually, no. Let's name this screen 2 just for consistency's sake. And then the key for that, what screen 2 is the title. So we're going to put that as the title. And then our view controller is going to be the screen 2 view controller at, and we're going to tell it that that's the view controller. And finally, we're going to stick a nil at the end of our NS dictionary. And then finally, after that, we're going to get rid of the screen 2 view controller, or release it because it's no longer needed. We just needed to stick it in the dictionary so we can refer to it later, but it's not actually needed until we load it, so we're going to release it for now. Now the next thing we're going to do in the await from nib method is create a back button, so you can get back from the thing that you're loading back to the main menu. And you can do that in the interface builder, or you can do it the way we're doing it, which is programmatically. So we're going to create a new UI bar button item, and we'll name that temporary bar button item, because once we've created it, we don't need to do anything with it again, so we can just get rid of it. And we're going to do UI bar button item alloc init, and we're going to set its title. I'll notice the dot syntax there, which I will refer to at the end of this, and we're going to call it back, and we're going to set self navigation item back bar button item to the temporary bar button item, and then we are going to release it. So, to speak briefly about the dot syntax, you can use the dot syntax to set properties, like we did in up here, temporary bar button item title back. The way you'd normally do that is something like temporary bar button item set title and then back, like that. And then similarly, to get that, you do temporary bar button item title, and that would return the title. With the dot syntax, that acts as both the setter and the getter. So all you have to do is temporary bar button item dot title equals whatever you want, and then to retrieve it, you just do temporary bar button item dot title. The other thing it can be used to do is to refer to objects like we're doing here, self.navigation item dot bar button item, and we're setting navigation's bar button item to the temporary bar button item that we just created, and then we're releasing it. The one thing that it can't do, that it can do in some other languages, is be used to call methods. So, for example, you can't do temporary bar button item dot release, because release is a method. You can do that in other languages, like Delphi does it that way, C# does it that way, and I think also Java does it that way. But like I said, this is sort of a hybrid thing because not everybody who uses Objective-C is favorable towards the dot syntax. So you can only use it for referring to objects and for getting and setting things, but not for running methods. For that, you still have to use the old bracket method, which I'm not in favor of because I think it looks messy. But that's my personal opinion. All right, so for the next thing we're going to do, we need to set up the table view. And if you'll remember back to the core data episodes when we were working with a table view in OS X, you use very similar methods to set it up. We need to tell it how many items are going to be in the table view. We need, in this case, to tell it what's going to happen when someone clicks on that, and we need to tell it how to draw each of the items, or in what are called cells in the table view. So to do that, if you start out with the navigation controller preset project here, it gives us a lot of those already. These are all views which we're not going to use at the moment, but down here you can see it's already written in the methods for us, and we just have to customize them. So number of sections in the table view, this is like sort of the number of columns. We're only going to need one, so just one. And then the number of rows in each section, this we're going to delete the 0 and return the number of items in our menu list array by using the count there. And then this is where the code comes from that's going to draw our cells. So this is table view, cell for row at index path, index path. We can leave all this here the same, and we're going to delete that and customize our cell first by doing the accessory type, which if you can look in the documentation for the different kind of accessories, or the different kind, accessory type is basically the little icon that appears on the side. For this, we're going to be using an arrow that indicates that when you click on it, it's going to slide away and a different thing is going to come up, and you can then go back. Which in this case is called UI Table View Cell Accessory Disclosure Identifier, which is a mouthful, but luckily we have automatic code completion, which should hopefully take some of the work out of that. Assuming I'm spelling this right. UI table view. Oh, it's UI table view. Cell accessory. Disclosure indicator. There we go. And then secondly, we need to set the title of it, which we can do by doing cell.text label dot title, or dot text rather, equals the menu list. So we're going to pull the title from our array of dictionaries by using the key. So we're going to do menu list object at index index path dot row. So this will tell us which row it's in, starting, as all programming things, numbering by 0. So the first thing in the row is going to be object at index 0, second 1, and for that we want the object for key, and we're going to retrieve the object that has the title key assigned to it. And finally, it's already written in here, we're going to return that cell. And then, let's see, making sure that there's not anything else we need to do at the moment. Scroll through here. Ah, yes. We have to tell it what we're going to do once someone selects that row. In this case, we're going to get rid of all of that and start from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do is tell our table view. We're going to use the D select row at index path, animated yes. That's going to make it so that when someone clicks it, instead of staying blue, it's going to fade back to white. So you just tap it and it goes away. Otherwise, when you clicked it, it would stay blue while it was switching, and that looks weird. So we're going to set it back to deselected. I'm going to set the UI view controller, and we're going to make a new instance of that called target view controller. And this is where we're going to load whatever we're switching to. And like the title, we're going to load this from our array of dictionaries. So use the same method, menu list object at index index path dot row object for key, capitalize that correctly, and this time we're going to be loading the object for the key view controller. Close that off, and finally we're going to push that loader using the navigation controller onto the screen. So we do self.navigation controller and use the push view controller. Our view controller is the target view controller, and animated yes. We would like it to animate onto the screen so it looks all nice. All right, I believe, let me scroll through here really quickly. I believe that's pretty much all we have to do for now. So let's try running it and see what happens. All right, what went wrong? Screen 2 undeclared. Wow, isn't that generic? Oh, I know what happened. Since we're referencing screen 2 and that comes from here, in our root view controller header, we need to import that. Otherwise, it will be like, what in the world is that? You didn't tell me what that is. So import, and in quotations, screen2.h. That should solve our problem there, hopefully. Yay. All right, here comes the simulator. There's our screen 2. When we click on it, it loads the screen. You can tell because it has that pretty background. And we hit back. It goes like that. There we go. So that's it for this hot cocoa. One thing I'd like to mention before we leave is that this is filmed 720p. I have that iPhone 4 emulator running at 50% because the regular emulator won't fit on the screen at 720p. See, that's what it looks like at half. If I make it bigger, that's it at 100%. But this is what the iPhone 4 looks like at 100%. That thing is huge. This is 720p HD, and the iPhone 4 is freaking huge on it. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was crazy. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Hot Cocoa. Come back next week where we will continue with this. We'll look at, if I load this up here and make it smaller so you can see it. Next episode, we're going to be checking out how to do the little flip thingy with the settings that you can save in the defaults thing for the iPhone so they don't get lost when you close your application. And we'll be looking at how to add this button up here with the modal view that pops up, as well as maybe, if I feel like it, how to make this look cooler by changing it from blue to black and by making this dark. So that's coming up in the next episode of Hot Cocoa. See you then.